Hello everyone, welcome back to Powerful Nothing and Magic the Gathering Cube podcast. I'm your host Dan, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host James. James, how are you doing this week? You well?
I'm well, yeah. Excited to talk about some Cube as always.
Yeah, we have a fun episode for everyone today. Today, we're going to be talking about the red Discard Matters deck that's kind of been popping up in a lot of cubes recently. We're going to be doing one of our package/archetype breakdowns. This is an archetype that we've kind of talked about a couple of times, primarily because it's just been getting more and more cards printed for it over the last couple of years, and it does kind of. There's always been like some support cards for it. I like some very powerful support cards from yesteryear, but just there's been like the Modern Horizons and like a little bit of sprinkling of goodness on top, along with some few other cards that has really brought it together and made it a whole archetype. So today we're going to be going over, firstly, how you can add it to your own cube if it's something you want to, if it's something you like the look of and you want to add, or if you know that the archetype is in a cube, to kind of give you a base so you can get the most out of it in your games. James, first off, before we kind of get into that actual deep dive itself, do you want to give us a quick overview of the red Discard Matters archetype?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the things that's really nice about this as a theme is that you can, it can be sort of as big or as small of a little package as you want it to be, really. It works really well as just a sprinkling of cards that care about this theme, because there will already be some independently powerful cards, most likely in your queue, that will work well with them. But if you want to dedicate more slots to it and lean into it a bit more as a full-on archetype, that can work really well as well, and gives a lot of interest to the drafts, I think.
Yeah, definitely. One thing with this archetype that kind of it's definitely something that's kind of like snuck up on us as an archetype, I would say, because it's kind of just, it's more just, there's been a bunch of very powerful cards printed that have kind of become cube staples, but they have this kind of underlying synergy with like caring about cards kind of discarding or going through exile, these kind of additional steps, and kind of like basically we're trying to pull it all together today. But yeah, James, I know you've played a fair amount of the MTGO Vintage Cube where this archetype has kind of had that little bit of sprinkling and is now kind of a thing. Kind of, how does the deck play?
Yeah, so I think for me, this as a little package works really well in most aggressive slanting red decks. I don't think it doesn't really need to be confined to a specific color combination. I think like red black or red green are like quite natural homes for it. But in general, I think any red deck with looking to play some cheap creatures, this can sort of slot into as a nice little package. And I actually really like that it gives the red aggressive deck something a little bit more interesting to do than just casting above rate creatures with haste at every point in the curve. And that's partly why I've lent into it with some of the cubes I've been building recently, is that I want there to be a red aggressive deck, but I kind of want it to be an interesting red aggressive deck rather than something where you just take all the cheap creatures.
Yeah, exactly. Just like from a design point of view, I always look for making my players do a little bit of something. It's not just free of just like I just take the red cards, or in the case of white aggro, I just take the cheap white cards. Kind of like you do need a little bit of something to bring it together, but it does reward the player for drafting it by giving you something more synergistic than Goblin Guide into two equivalent Goblin Guides.
Yes, exactly. And it's nice that it lets you do that without having to put a million cards in your cube that only work in this very narrow thing, right? Like most of the cards we're going to talk about today are generically pretty good cards that just happen to make each other better.
Cool. So the next section we're going to touch on is actually going through some of the independently powerful cards that you will see in this deck. Most of these are cards that see play in cubes anyway because they're just actually quite good. But the point of this archetype is they kind of get together when they are combined. You know, synergy, we love all that. The first one I want to touch on is a card that's really kind of just, it keeps getting better. Like I just keep seeing it pop up in more and more winning decks, especially in my cube. And that's Currency Converter. It's a single mana for an artifact. Whenever you discard a card, you may exile that card from your graveyard. It has 2 and tap it to draw a card, then discard a card. And you can then tap it to put an exiled card with Currency Converter into your graveyard. If it's a land card, create a treasure token. If it's a non-land card, create a 2/2 black rogue creature token. So this is really like one of those like glue cards. It fills so many holes in so many different decks. Like in an artifact deck, it can be a target for your Urza Saga, that kind of stuff. It's a good bit of card advantage. But in this deck specifically, it is a looter. It is a way of taking a card from our hand and putting it into the bin. But on top of that, it also draws us a card. We love that. And it then gives us value while we're doing that because it gives us the ability to make blockers or to then ramp us. It kind of... This episode is called Red Discard Matters. We need something to discard. And this is a nice little engine that is very cheap. It's very free to put into a deck, especially in Cube. And it kind of does everything that it really keeps the deck ticking over while rewarding us for doing what we want to be doing. James, what do you think of Currency Converter? I know you have played a lot of this card.
Yeah, really like this card. Powerful card, you'd put it in cubes regardless, good in the artifacts deck. But the reason I specifically like it in this deck is generally Currency Converter is a powerful card, but it can be a little slow. Like in a lot of more high power level cubes, you don't necessarily want to be all the time like play this on turn 1, activate it on turn 2, because you're not getting a creature or treasure until turn 3 in that scenario. You don't necessarily want to invest mana early, right? If you're discarding cards for other reasons, though, you get your creature or your treasure for free. Like if you go turn 1 this, turn 2 cycle my Oliphant, for example, I'm immediately making a treasure making a creature on that second turn without having to invest any further mana to the Currency Converter. Even better if I'm discarding for free. Like say I play this a turn, I play a Fable of Mirror-Breaker, and then the next turn I'm going to rummage with my Fable. I get my creature or my treasure without putting any more mana into this at all. So really nicely fits the slot of powerful card that you'll put in your cube anyway, even if you had no other ways to discard cards. But if you do, it makes it a ton better.
No, 100%. Talking of good Magic cards, talk to us about Inti, James. This is a very strong Magic card in general, but in this deck where we're doing some discarding, it gets really bad. It gets much better.
Yeah, for sure. So this is Inti Seneschal the Sun. Will be familiar to anyone who enjoys beating down with small red creatures. It's 1 red for a 2/2. Whenever you attack, you may discard a card. When you do, put a +1/+1 counter on a target attacking creature and it gains trample until end of turn. And whenever you discard 1 or more cards, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card until your next end step. So this really nicely fits the role of puts on a ton of pressure by itself. The trample is a huge deal. It's going to force through a ton of damage. So we like it in our creature-based aggressive deck anyway. But if you are discarding cards for other ways than just this trigger, then you're going to be getting a ton of extra card advantage. Like it's such nice gravy to get on top of that. Even if it's just 1 or 2 other ways to discard cards in your whole deck, you're basically getting an extra card out of it every time you do that, right? So it's really powerful to give it that extra angle, and it means you don't have to be attacking to get value out of this. If your opponent has good blockers and you don't have an attack, you maybe still get some value out of your Inti. If you're discarding cards for other reasons, that's going to help you dig into your library, find the removal spell or the threat that you need.
Yeah, and similar to Currency Converter, like it does work itself as like a self-contained package, but the fact that both those triggers are separate, they don't have to trigger off each other. They can trigger when you, as James said, whenever you discard 1 or more cards. It's very nice. They're kind of like by itself, it is a great aggro card with a bit of card advantage. But in this deck, it is a great engine of card advantage, and that's kind of why we do like this deck. But yeah, next up in this archetype is just a really bloody strong Magic card, and that's Fable of the Mirror Breaker. It's 2 and a red for an enchantment saga. I have to read quite a lot now. Chapter 1, create a 2/2 red goblin shaman creature token with when it attacks, create a treasure token. Chapter 2, you may discard up to 2 cards. If you do, draw that many cards. And Chapter 3, you exile this saga and transform it. It transforms into Reflections of Kiki-Jiki. It is a 2/2 enchantment creature goblin shaman. With 1 untap, create a token that's a copy of another target non-legendary creature you control, except it has haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So this card has just continually performs. Like, I think this is quite a high pick in any cube. Like in any unpowered cube, this is first pickable quite a lot of the time. And in powered cube, like, yes, you want power, but I think you'd still be fine taking this if, like, in a middling pack. It's just again, it's one card that gives you so much advantage by itself. It makes a body, it makes treasures, it's card advantage, and it also lets you copy the best creature that you have for one single mana. That's really, really strong. But again, in this deck, where we want to be discarding cards, the discarding 2 cards, like again, we can curve out with Currency Converter into this, and this just does everything. It's really, really strong card. James, I know you love Fable of the Mirror Breaker. I like half the winning decks I see you post in our Discord just have, there's a Fable in there. Love that.
Oh yeah, Fable's really messed up. You probably don't need me to tell you why Fable's messed up, but having these sorts of discard outlets, which you would put in your deck anyway, is really nice as a way to power up the discard masses archetype. So similar situation, I think, with our next card, Fear of Missing Out. This is the 1 red for a 2/3 enchantment creature. With when it enters the battlefield, you discard a card if you do and draw a card. And when it attacks, if you have Delirium, you untap target creature, attacking creature, and you get another combat step. This is a pretty powerful card by itself. 2/3 for 2 is a nice body. It's giving you some selection, and that Delirium trigger will win a game. That will win a lot of games if you can enable it. Especially with the other big creatures you get in red, stuff like Inti, stuff like Lalia. Getting that extra attack with one of them on the crucial turn that's often what swings a race, right? So pretty high on this card. So, what it does for our discard matters deck, obviously, it's a discard, but also our discard matters deck, which is discarding cards for other reasons, is going to be better than most decks at enabling that Delirium ability, or better than the average red aggro deck, anyway.
Exactly. And for those paying attention, currently we have already spoken about an artifact. We've spoken about a creature. We spoke about an enchantment. This is an enchantment creature, kind of like throw in a lightning bolt and you're basically already there. So yeah, very, very solid. Yeah, Fear of Missing Out. And this does have combo potential, but that's not as relevant in this deck. The next card that's really strong in this archetype that you will see just generally in a lot of cubes is Seasoned Pyromancer. This is 1 red for a 2/2 creature human shaman. When it enters, discard 2 cards, then draw 2 cards. For each non-land card discarded this way, create a 1/1 red elemental creature token. And it has 3 red to exile this creature card from your graveyard to create 2 1/1 red elemental creature tokens. So again, it's 3 mana for 2 bodies and some really solid card filtering. It can really set up your next couple of turns while stabilizing you and just giving you that board state. Also, this goes great into a Hell Rider because you've got 3 extra bodies on the board. We love all of that. And then the ability to get it back from your graveyard is also really nice because it is also an ETB. So it's a way of kind of like double dipping. Like effectively, think of this as like a big Faithless looting. That's kind of a really solid way to think about this card. And yeah, very, very solid.
Yeah, for sure. So, and the next one I want to talk about is just continuing the theme of it is really easy to be discarding a lot of cards in red without costing yourself anything. It's just the land cyclers. So the Oliphants, the Troll of Khazad-dûms. You could play the 2 mana ones if you want, but I really recommend it in most cubes. But these are great cards that you will play anyway for the fixing, so you can fetch dual lands, and you'll play them because sometimes you draw your land fixer later and you get to cast it as a big creature. But this is just another way that you will put in your deck regardless that will trigger your inties, trigger your currency converters, and get you that little bit of extra value that you need.
Yeah, they just continue to be great. I think they're kind of staples in the majority of formats that can run them, and yet they're fantastic in Cube. The next one to touch on is just another card that is just seeing Cube play since the moment it got printed. Banned in Standard immediately is Smuggler's Copter. 2 generic for a 3/3 flying vehicle with crew 1, and when it attacks or blocks, you may draw a card if you do discard a card. We love looting in this deck, and this is just such a free, this is like the cleanest vehicle for me. It's really good, and it got banned in standard just because it goes in every deck. And this is just a staple in any kind of aggressive deck, just because it upgrades your token from your Seasoned Pyromancer, or it jumps a creature that can no longer get through your opponent's board, while also giving you that filtering. Just like that general bit of looting is great in any deck that wants the buff to a cheap creature. But in this deck, again, where we are getting more advantage from the discard, just any repeatable way of discarding and replacing them is really, really good. And Smuggler's Copter, yeah, it's a fantastic card and a powerhouse in this deck.
Yeah, for sure. Powerful card, good early pick as well, because it's going to go in any deck with enough creatures to support it. And again, gets extra points if you're getting some triggers out of discarding cards. The final ones I want to touch on here, because they will be in your cubes regardless, in a lot of high power level cubes, is cards like Faithless Looting and Bitter Reunion. These, I think, can be good in these decks, but you do need to mean it a little bit more, because these are not cards that you would put in your red beatdown decks most of the time, right? They will be in your cube a lot of the time, but often for other decks, right? They'll be there for Reanimator or whatnot. So you do, I think, need to care about getting some triggers a little bit more than with a lot of the other cards we've talked about here, because they're not affecting the board, right? They're not playing into your beatdown plan quite as much. But still powerful cards and can power up this deck a lot. And I'd say pretty free to include in the cube, because they're great in Reanimator, they're great in a lot of other decks that care about the graveyard.
Yeah, these are just kind of staple cards in cube. I think Faithless Looting goes in every cube. I think Bitter Reunion is kind of there's a bunch of other cards that do a similar sort of effect. Like there's Cathartic Pyre, I think, which I also quite like, which is one on a red for a lightning bolt effect to a creature or the loot, which is quite nice.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a Tormenting Voice variant in literally every single set at this point, right?
Yes, with set mechanic, yes.
Yeah. Apologies, we've stopped talking about them on the set review. There's too many of them.
When they print a Power Crept one, we will. But until then, just a couple of cards. We're not going to go into too much detail as we're finishing off this section, because these are just kind of generically strong Magic cards. But you have things like Pyroglyph that gets better in this archetype because it's putting stuff into the graveyard. Pyroglyph gets bigger. You have Wheel of Fortune, which isn't going to be in every cube, but the ones it's in, it's just a bonus way of putting cards into the graveyard and drawing more cards for you to put them into the graveyard later. And then if you're in those more higher power environments, you also might have a thing like an LED, like a Lion's Eye Diamond. It's a mana rock that discards your hand. Again, not for every cube, but it can be quite cool in that, especially if you're then also maybe doing an Underworld Breach. Maybe there's some cool stuff, there's some cool lines. If you're using, these are kind of cards that use your graveyard as a resource as well. And Underworld Breach is a red card that kind of you could pick up, and it could be just a solid way of getting back some aggressive creatures or even burning them out. It's kind of it's not the traditional use of Underworld Breach, but it is a cool one.
Yeah, I quite like some Fair Breach. I think Fair Breach can be quite fun.
Exactly. As intended. Exactly.
Yeah. I cast my Underworld Breach and Thoughtseize you twice. It's a great time.
But all good. But yeah, so I think those are kind of those are cards that if you saw in a cube, you would not think anything of. And again, they synergize great with each other. And that, in some cubes, that could just be the synergy. That could just be the package. Like in a smaller cube, like a 360 cube, maybe that is just these cards are there because they're good. And you can just draft them together, and because of that little bit of extra synergy that we've spoken about, it makes your red aggro deck more powerful, more aggressive. It gives it that little extra spice. But now we're going to go over some cards that are specifically for this package if you want to support it. These are cards that specifically you are only really going to run if this is something you are trying to make work. And if you see this in a cube, if you see these cards in a cube, it means that this archetype is kind of being pushed, and it's kind of more what red or maybe a red X adjacent deck is trying to do. James, I missed this card when it came out. Do you want to talk us about Evora Insatiable Air? Because this card seems really cool.
Yeah, I've really liked this one, actually. I've put it in a couple of cubes now, and it's always done good work. So it's 1 red for a 1/1 with Trample. And when Evora enters, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you create a blood token. And whenever you discard a card, you put a +1/+1 counter on Evora. So I do think, so it does technically fuel itself, right? You hit them, you make a blood, that lets you discard cards, and it gets bigger. I think for this card to actually be good, though, you do need other ways to discard cards, because otherwise you're relying on being able to have a good attack with your 1/1 on on turn 3, which is kind of tough. But if you have other ways to discard, then you can cast Evolve. Next turn, you untap, you discard another card in some other way. This gets bigger, opens up an attack for Evolve. Then that gets you blood, that gets you more discarding, that gets you more selection, and it really snowballs quite nicely. And it's nice as well that compared to like Inti, where you have to like pay to get the extra power and toughness, with this, you're just getting power and toughness by discarding cards for other effects, right? That part isn't mana gated, which is nice. You can also, if you can discard cards at instant speed, then you can do this in combat, which is pretty good. Really, really nice payoff actually for discarding cards and being aggressive, but you do need some other cards to enable this.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this one isn't as like it's sort of an engine, but just that first initial step is a bit trickier than something like Inti. But partly because Inti starts as a 2/2, this starts as a 1/1. Like, hopefully your opponent, like there is a world where your opponent doesn't do anything until turn 3, maybe, but that's quite unlikely in more powerful settings where this deck can still exist. So yeah, just having this needs that bit of extra help, but once you've got it rolling, it is a very solid engine. Like, you only really need to get like one attack in, and then it kind of is self-reliant. Basically, it'll kind of always be above, in theory, the curve your opponent is popping out. But yeah, very solid card. I do like Evora. I've recently added this to my cube, and yeah, really, really solid card. Another new one that I've really liked is Detective's Phoenix. This is a really cool card. It is a 2/2 enchantment creature Phoenix. It has Bestow for a single red, Collect Evidence 6, which is a combination of multiple mechanics. Basically, if this is in your graveyard, you can bestow this, and that means equip it, enchant it to a creature by paying a single red mana and exiling cards with total mana value 6 or greater from your graveyard. It also has flying and haste. An enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has flying and haste, and you may cast Detective Phoenix from your graveyard using its bestow ability. So what that all means is that basically, if it's in your hand, it's a 3 mana, 2/2 flying haste. That's a pretty solid body. We like that. But with the bestow, it's something that we can kind of quite freely put into our graveyard, and then later in the game we can use it to jump one of our creatures. It becomes a aura that you can equip to the creature. If that creature dies, we then get it in play because that's how bestow works. It works how you want it to. I've mainly played a lot of this in like Canadian Highlander Dredge, where putting this on a Hogak is phenomenal. But we're now in a world where Hogak's in cube, and we can do that too. But in this deck specifically, it's like one of the things you do need. Like, it's similar to like how the Madness decks used to work, but this deck, the timings on this deck are so much nicer to you. Detective Phoenix is a fantastic card because if you need a 3-mana beater, it is a 3-mana beater. But if you want something to discard, it's also something to discard that's not then dead. It's not something that kind of like, oh, if I discard my Goblin Rabblemaster, that just goes to the bin. It's basically gone for the rest of the game, whereas this can still have an effect later because it has that bestow ability from the graveyard. I really like Detective Phoenix. Really strong card. I've been impressed with it ever since it came out. Shocking for a Modern Horizons 3 card.
Yeah, for sure. Love the Phoenix. It's just a nice thing to discard to value. It sits in your graveyard, and honestly, your opponent should be very scared of it while it's sitting in your graveyard, because it's just being the 1 mana to just bestow for +2/+2 flying and haste is that makes your next threat you draw so much scarier, right? Like, even if it's just like an Inti or a Lelia or something, just that's now chucking in with an extra 2 points of power and haste right away is really powerful. Another nice little combo to call out with this as well, which I think is very good. This with Land Cyclers is quite nice because they they all have 6 CMC. They sit in your graveyard. It doesn't cost you anything to put them in your deck, and that pays for your Collect Evidence cost, which is quite nice.
That's hot. We like that. Nice.
Yeah. All right, next one we want to call out was Annie's Ravager. So this is the 2 and a red for a 3/3. It attacks each combating able. Whenever it attacks, you discard your hand, then draw 3 cards, and it has Madness 1 and a red. So worth calling out with this, you need to have a pretty low curve if you want to put this into play, because it's attacks each turn if able and discards your hand. You kind of don't want to run this out if you have a bunch of cards left in your hand. But if you meet that criteria, this can be very powerful. It's if you don't have stuff you care about discarding, this is drawing you 3 cards when you attack. Plus, it has madness. So the curve of, say, let you play a one of the 2 mana creatures that lets you discard, so like a Interior Devourer or something like that. You get your hit in, you discard this, you madness it out on that next turn, is really, really powerful. Also worth noting, madness, obviously you can play it at instant speed. If your discard outlet is at instant speed, so your opponent doesn't necessarily know it's coming, then you get your good attack in, you get your value. This is a really nice card in the right deck. You've got to be aggressive. You've got to be discarding cards, because this is below the bar as just a red aggressive card, I think. Like kind of the theme we have of the ones in this sort of tier is they're still functional if you're not discarding them. Like it's still, you could just play this, like tap out, like play on turn like 5, say, when you've emptied your hand. The next turn you swing in, you draw some cards. But it's below the bar, right? There are better free drops if that's all you're doing with it. But if you're discarding it and you're paying that madness cost, it's really, really powerful.
Yeah, I really like this card. I think it's just been really solid. Like I am a bit higher than you, I think, in playing it in aggro decks, but like that's just partly because I see this as more as just like this is this a lot of time. This is just my top end that's drawing me 3 cards, and like there's plenty of games where just drawing where all I want to do is draw some burn to finish off a game. But I love that Angie's Ravager. It's really good and really strong in this deck, because discarding your hand in this deck is an upside. When like especially if you have a bunch of the cards we talked about at the start, like Currency Converter, Inti, these kind of cards are really, really good with Angie's Ravager. And the fact that it's actually giving you more things to discard game after game, or turn after turn, is just great. We love this card. Another cool card in this deck is Conspiracy Theorist. This is 1 and a red for a 2/2 creature human shaman. I think I've said both shaman and shaman in this episode, but don't worry about it. I will decide what I'll pick the proper one later. When it attacks, you may pay 1 generic and discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Whenever you discard 1 or more non-land cards, you may exile from your graveyard. If you do, you may cast it this turn. This is really cool. This is another one where those 2 clauses are separate. So base level, it is a solid 2 mana attacker that can loot on attacks by us paying 1 mana. That's fine. This feels very much like a red Merfolk looter, because you have to do it when you attack. That's quite red. We love that. But then the second line of text means that this can just sit there in play and be a little engine piece. Like this turns the cards we're discarding into playable cards. So it means that kind of like because the curve of this deck is generally quite low. Like if we play this on turn 2, then on turn 3 we cast our Faithless Looting or something like that. We can discard a card that we want to cast, and then we're not down any equity. We haven't just again. It's similar to why I like Detective's Phoenix. It makes discarding cards not a negative. We still get all the bonuses. It's like we still synergize with cards like Currency Converter and Inti, but we get the ability to then, like, basically, we get to have our cake and eat it with Conspiracy Theorists. We get to discard our card, we get all the value from discarding, but then we can still cast the card, we don't lose it. Like, that's really cool. I really like this card.
Yeah, for sure. This is really powerful. This essentially makes, like, every rummage into just drawing a card, right? Because you're getting that card you discard back. And it's, in some ways, it's better than something like Inti, where you're getting a new card off the top, because when you're getting a card off the top, you don't know if you're going to be able to cast it this turn, right? Whereas with this, you can plan. You can say, okay, I'm going to discard this land, play the land out of my graveyard. There's no randomness there, right? I'm always getting to use that card, which is pretty nice. The challenge, if you don't have other ways to discard cards, is you need to attack to get the trigger, and it's only a 2/2. It's not giving you any more stats. But if you can just sit there and discard cards for other reasons, this is a nice value engine.
No, 100%. The next one isn't one I have seen as much, James. It's from Fallout. Talk to us about Veronica Dissident Scribe.
Yeah, this is a fun one. It's kind of a slightly bigger version of that attack and give value creature. So it's 2 and a red for a 3/3 with Menace. When Veronica attacks, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. But whenever you discard one or more non-land cards for the first time each turn, you create a junk token. So junk is the artifact where you sack it to exile the top card, and you can play it this turn. This is quite nice because it's a solid, like slightly evasive body. It's getting you value on attacks. Because you can kind of think about this as drawing a card on attack, right? Because you're getting your card from your discard back. Well, I guess you can think about this as like you're making the junk token on the attack whilst getting a little bit of selection. But on top of that, you're also triggering all your other stuff that cares about discard. And when you discard cards for other reasons, you'll get this junk token once a turn. So this is nice. Like, obviously, it's a 3-drop, whereas a lot of the other sort of value attacking creatures we've talked about are 2-drops. But this is a nice, like, to have that option at a different point in the curve. And I found it fairly strong whenever I've played it.
I'll be honest, I don't think I've ever played with this card, but I love the look of it. And I do think it is what, like, it's in this category, the kind of the cards that worked well when we are trying to do this, because red 3-drops are normally quite powerful. Like, this is a card, like, you are putting this in and you are playing this if you are meaning it. You are meaning that you're doing this deck. But in that deck, I do think it is very good.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's not a horrible card if you weren't discarding cards for other reasons. There's just better 3-drops exist in that scenario. So if you're putting it in your cube, you're probably putting it in your cube because you're trying to support this thing. No,
definitely. The next card I love, it escaped from under my decking and into my heart. Next up is Ox of Agonis. This is a great Magic card. 3 red for a 4/2 creature Ox. When it enters, discard your hand, then draw 3 cards, and it has escape for red. Exile 8 other cards from your graveyard. That means you can cast this card from your graveyard for its escape cost, and the Ox escapes with a +1/+1 counter on it. So again, this is just another very solid Magic card that is both an engine and a reward. Like, this is a great card at kind of helping trigger all of our cards that care about discard, because we are just dumping our whole hand into the bin, and we are drawing 3 cards. The worst case scenario with this is we don't have cards to discard to trigger all of our stuff, but then guess what? We've still drawn 3 cards. That's wonderful. We love that. And then later in the game, if it gets traded off for, or we just discard it again, like the Detective's Phoenix, or like the Angie's Ravager with its Madness cost, it's a card that we're fine putting into the bin. We're fine pitching it. Like, I have a note later, but I might as well mention it now. Like a few years ago, we were discarding things like Root Wallers. I love Root Wallers. They are fantastic. But this is a great example of how this deck has just got better, because we're now discarding Detectives, Phoenixes, and Angie's Ravagers and Ox of Agonises instead of Root Wallers. And it pains me so much to say that. But, like, this draws us 3 cards and is a 5/3 for red in most of these decks. Like, that's fantastic. Like, yeah, the Ox is a great Magic card.
Yeah, for sure. Ox of Agonis is... I love escaping Ox of Agonis. I really don't enjoy casting Ox of Agonis most of the time. So in a deck like this, where you can just discard it for value, escape it later, it's a very nice option to have.
No, definitely. And then our next section, James. So kind of like we've gone over cards that are kind of free to include. We've gone over some cards that are kind of more, if you're looking to support it, but kind of like as a package, shall we say? Kind of like you want to kind of like it to exist in your environment. Maybe you have a 540 cube, a 720 cube, where kind of like you're looking for a bit of spice, a bit of extra flavoring. These extra cards, I'm going to say, these are kind of what turn it from a package into an archetype, into like what my red section is doing. I think that's a fair way of putting it. Would you agree, James?
Yes, for sure. So most of the cards we talked about in the previous section were like maybe not completely optimal if you weren't triggering the discard stuff and having other discard stuff going on, but they were still very functional, playable cards in that scenario. The cards we're talking about here basically don't work unless you're in this deck and you have a lot of discarding cards and triggering.
Yeah, and some of these cards are very, very powerful. We both have a bit of a soft spot, I think, for the first 2 cards, James. Talk to us about Squee, Goblin Nabob, and Master of Death, James.
Yeah, so Squee, Goblin Nabob is the 2 and a red for a 1/1, so not crushing the vanilla test. But at the beginning of your upkeep, you may return this card from your graveyard to your hand. So mostly the joke with Squee is that we never cast it. All we do is we discard it for value. So we have a looter or a rummaging effect. At the beginning of our next upkeep, it's going to come back to our hand, and then we're going to do it again. And essentially, it makes our first discard every turn free, because this isn't a real card that we discarded. It's coming straight back to our hand next turn. And there's no mana involved in any of that, right? So it's a really nice little way to enable a value engine. Master of Death essentially does the same thing, but you have to pay a life to return it. It's actually a much better card if you cast it, but it costs blue and black mana, so we're probably not casting it very much in this deck. Yeah, these are obviously not playable cards unless you have repeatable ways to discard cards for value. But if you do have that going on and you're reliably using this as an engine every turn, these actually can be quite powerful engine pieces.
Yeah, and don't worry about them. As James mentioned, we're not really casting these cards, so don't. Master of Death isn't a Dimir card. It's a red card in this deck. Like I have cast them before. It is like the Surveil 2 is quite nice, but like it is primarily like it can be included in a cube for some synergy with a graveyard deck, for example. But if you're doing this is a red card. Think of it like a red card. Don't worry about the mana value. It's fine. We're talking of a card that cares about red things. Next up, we have Anger. This is 3 of the cycle of these cards are so good, and 2 are so bad, but Anger's a good one. Don't worry. Anger is 3 in a red for a 2/2 creature incarnation with haste, and as long as Anger is in your graveyard and you control a mountain, creatures you control have haste. So again, this is another card that we want. Like 4 mana 2/2 haste isn't a card that we want to be casted. I would almost put this as a 0 drop on my cube list as a hint to my players. This is going in to go to the bin and give my deck value. And again, that is a bit of an ask. Like it's why this is in the section of cards that you have to mean this archetype for this to get in, because you don't often put a card in your deck that you have no intention of casting and you only want to go to the bin. That doesn't come up that often, but Anger can be worth it just because of you could do that as early as turn 1. Just Faithless Looting, like Mountain, Faithless Looting, Anger in the bin. Your whole deck having haste is phenomenal. Like, you're an aggro deck. At the heart of it, you are an aggro deck. Your whole board having haste is phenomenal. Like Inti getting in straight away. Even Evora, Insatiable Air, getting in straight away gets around that thing of putting the first counter on it. It's fantastic. Yeah, I love Anger. I run it in, I think, so many commander decks. But if you want to play it in cube, this is the archetype for it nowadays.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of creatures that work well in this deck that have powerful attack triggers. So giving them haste is great. It means you're so much more likely to get that attack trigger, right? Like your Annie's Ravager having haste is kind of a huge deal. But yeah, you never want to be casting this card. So and you really have to discard it quite early on to get the value, right? It doesn't actually help you that much if you discard it on like turn 6. It doesn't make your board any better. So you need a lot of ways to be rummaging to make this card actually good. But if you have them, it's cool. Okay, the next card we have is honestly like just one of my favorite cards they've printed in the last 5 years. I think it's sick. I
wish this card was was multicolored and legendary.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think that sort of exists, but this one is specifically better. But yeah, sorry. Talk about Containment Construct, James.
Yes, Containment Construct is 2 mana for a 2/1 artifact creature construct. Whenever you discard a card, you may exile that card from your graveyard. If you do, you may play that card this turn. So this is essentially the text that we had on the Conspiracy Theorist, but it doesn't enable itself. This card has no way to let you discard a card. You have to do that with other cards. Honestly, I quite like it when there are more cards like this in cubes where the card doesn't solve its own mission. It's you have to do a little bit of work to make this card good, but when it is good, it can really pay off. Like, it doesn't say non-land anywhere on this, so just like discarding lands, play the land this turn. It can be a really nice little engine if you've got those repeatable rummaging effects. not a super aggressive card, but can give you some good staying power if you're enabling it. But that is the key. It's you need a lot of ways to discard for this card to be worth it.
Yeah, like this is my favorite type of engine card. Yeah, it's not the Modern Horizons. It's all in one. You need something to do with this, but I think this card's great. And for anyone who's writing, I know Oscar Rubbish Reclaimer exists as a Dimir Legend version of this card, but the non-land part is important. Like I love discard. Like when you discard lands, like when you Faithless Looting, just like madness thing, play like discard a land, play your land. It's like you're doing so much. Yeah, Containment Construct is a phenomenal Magic card. Actually, talking of madness, our next card on the list is Fiery Temper. Fiery Temper is 1 red for an instant, deals 3 damage to any target. That doesn't sound very efficient, but wait, there's more. It has madness for a single red. So, in this deck, this is another version of Lightning Bolt. And more versions of Lightning Bolt in your red aggressive deck is normally pretty good. You will still run Lightning Bolt, do not get me wrong, you will probably still run Chain Lightning. But this is a card like we've spoken about this before on this podcast, and I'm a big proponent of customizing your flex slots to match what your decks are trying to do. So this is red burn spells is a flex slot. There's a bunch of different effects on them, including this. So, like the non-discard deck will probably consider running this card, but it is a burn spell that you are likely to get because any red X deck is going to take the Lightning Bolt. This is a burn card that you can give to the player in this deck as a little bit of a reward for being in this deck. I love Fiery Temper. A touch of like a sprinkling of madness, I think is where this is the right amount for this deck. I don't think you want to be full madness cards because they haven't, to an extent, the madness cards have not been power crept along with everything else. But Fiery Temper can still be a Lightning Bolt, and Lightning Bolt is still good even in 2025.
Yeah, for sure. Like we don't have a ton of madness cards in these lists because basically we're talking about a package or an archetype for a fairly powerful cube here, and the madness cards just don't meet that criteria. Like, I'm sorry to say it, Ravenous Worm is not very good.
James.
Fiery Temper, on the other hand, very efficient. We love to see it. And it's kind of building a Lightning Bolt, but it's actually way better than that, right? Because if you attack with your Inti and you discard this and bolt something, that's a lot better than a bolt, right? Because it was a bolt that also let you discard it for free, right? It meant you didn't have to discard another card. So yeah, I think if you have enough discard, this card's pretty good, but you do need to mean it because 3 mana deal for your instant speed is not really good enough in most of these cubes, right?
No, I do agree, and yeah. It's why you only see like seeing Fiery Temper on a list is basically a shortcut to knowing that this deck is there, or that there is a deck that cares about discard existing because the reason to pick it is that it's there rather than anything else.
Okay, so next up we have a card from the Warhammer 40k decks, which I think is a really sweet card, actually. This is Poxwalkers. So it's 2 and a black for a 3/1 Death Touch. Secretly not a black card, though, is the key here, because it has, whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, return Poxwalkers from your graveyard to the battlefield. Tapped. So this is... the joke here is kind of that we have a lot of ways to discard. So we don't need to cast for Poxwalkers, right? We just dump it in our graveyard for free. And then a lot of the cards we've talked about today involve casting stuff from somewhere that isn't in your hand, right? Like Madness, for example, you cast the card from exile. If cards like Containment Construct, cards like Conspiracy Theorist, these are all letting you exile cards and then you cast the card from exile. So all that stuff triggers your Poxwalkers, you get your Poxwalkers back. I don't know if this is too cute. I've been trying it in a couple of cubes. It's but I think it is worth. It seems cool to me. I'm lower confidence on this one being good. I think obviously it's better if you have some black mana in your deck as well, which sometimes you will, because then you can cast it in an emergency. But I think if you have enough ways to cast stuff from not your hand, I can see this being good.
This is a card that I love this card, and you are correct. Like, there's plenty of cards in this deck that do make it trigger, and like if this is going to find a place it is in this deck, I'm a massive fan of Pox. I do think this would be basically if the Warhammer precons were more readily available on MTGO. I think this would be making more of a splash in some of the older formats. People would be playing it more if there was more access to it. Yeah, Poxwalkers is a great Magic card. It often sees a lot of play in those formats with our next card, and that's Bazaar of Baghdad. I don't think I need to tell people how good of a card this is, but Bazaar of Baghdad is a land that says tap, draw 2 cards, then discard 3 cards. So this is probably the most broken card in this deck, but it does nothing really by itself. This is a card that is phenomenal, is unbelievably powerful. Unbelievably powerful when it's put in with all the other bits that we've spoken about. Like this with any of the cool enablers that we've been talking about, like Inti or Currency Converter or like Evora especially. Like this with Evora slaps so hard. Like this makes Evora put a 4/4 immediately, and you're putting 3 things on it every turn. That is so good. Bazaar does need the help. That's why you see it in like dredge lists where you get repeatable value for it. But in this deck where we are wanting to discard cards and we're being rewarded for discarding cards, it is card disadvantage. It is a land that does not tap for mana. That draws us 2 cards, hooray. But then we discard 3 cards. We are down a card each time. We need a reason to be down a card each time. We need a reason to make that good. And this deck takes advantage of it with all the synergy cards that we've gone over. One day I would love to own a Bazaar of Baghdad, James, but until then, Proxy ahoy. Yeah, phenomenal Magic card. It's my favorite Magic card I don't own easily, and it's probably top 5 anyway, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I think Bazaar is so much fun in Cube. It's one of those cards where I suspect that if you looked at it from a point of view of like you had 17 lands for cubes somehow, which I hope never exists, and you got the cold hard stats on how much Bazaar of Baghdad wins in most cubes, it's probably not that much.
Oh, it's going to be so low, but I don't care.
Yeah, exactly. Because when your Bazaar is really humming, you feel like you're doing something so powerful, and it's you have to do a lot of work to get there. I can't guarantee great results all the time, but when it goes, oh boy, does it go. And the other thing that's really nice in this deck and where you can get around the card disadvantage is that if your stuff just cares about you having discarded a card, well, when you're empty-handed and you activate this, you don't go down any cards. You essentially just mill 2 cards, but it's triggering off discard is 2 triggers for your things that say whenever you discard a card, do X. So that's really nice. It's a 0 mana way to enable all your madness stuff, get all your triggers going. Also a nice little call out for this. If you're running Urborg in your cube, that's quite a nice little combo because it obviously if you have the Urborg in play, this taps for mana. Yeah, so you can makes it easier to run it out earlier. Yeah, love Bazaar. Proceed with caution, I guess, is the caveat.
No, great Magic card. No, run it, you cowards.
Yeah. Okay, I like yours better. I like yours better.
Yeah. Nice. The last 2 in this section of cards that kind of you're only really going to run if you really mean it. James, I know I can say the name of this card. How are you with Asmo?
I can say Asmo.
Okay. Come on, no, I believe you. Give it a go. Give it a go.
Next card we're talking about is Asmo Vanomardicadestignaculdakar?
Almost. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that section and speed it up, and I think you've got it.
Okay. Let's go with that. Asmo Vanomardicadestignaculdakar? This is Asmo. This is the 3/3. It technically doesn't have a mana cost, but as long as you have discarded a card this turn, you may pay a red or a black to cast it. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a card named the Underworld Cookbook and put it into your hand. and you can sack 2 foods to have target its creature deal 6 to itself. The Underworld Cookbook is a card for single mana. You can tap it and discard a card to make food. It obviously fuels that second ability. You should put either both of these cards or neither of these cards in a cube. If they're both in, it's kind of a fun little quest to put it together. It can be quite powerful as an engine, but obviously you need a ton of ways to discard a card, or you can't cast this.
Yeah, these are both fun. Like they are the Underworld Cookbook, I think, can be drafted in a deck that isn't this, but yeah, you're right. They only go in a cube if they are together, and they are a nice little reward again for this. Like, yeah, the Cookbook's a nice enabler. Yeah, and Asmo is a cool aggressive creature. Like Asmo kind of fills a similar hole to like another card that can go in this deck, and that's Hollow One. It's only really a card you're adding if you mean it. Hollow One is it's 5 generic mana for a 4/4 with cycling for 2 generic. But it importantly costs 2 less to cast for each card you've cycled or discarded this turn. That can be quite hot. Like in specifically this deck, that can be quite hot because a lot of the time this is a 0 mana or a 1 mana 4/4. Like that's really good. Like on turn 2, Faithless Looting into this, you're fueling up your graveyard, you're doing all your cool stuff, and you have a 4/4 on the cheap. It's not a card that goes in a lot of decks, but I really like Hollow One in this build. And again, it's if you're going deep. Like it's if you're 540, 720, and you're trying to this and you're looking for extra little bits. This is the kind of like Hollow One is cute, it is cool, but I do really have a soft spot for Hollow One.
Yeah, it's a cool card. The tricky bit is, right, you really need to be discarding 2 cards because if you're in discard 1, 3 mana 4/4 still isn't good.
What's that?
Yeah. I guess it's kind of cool that you probably will actually cycle it sometimes in this deck because cycling triggers your discard stuff. So maybe that's a thing. It could be a cool payoff if you're doing a lot of this.
Sick. So kind of like I think that's the bulk of the cards that we kind of like individual cards we want to talk about. We will I will also put a list to all of them in the show notes if you just want to copy and paste them into your cube, for example. Nice and straightforward. But I think let's kind of wrap up the conversation with a couple of other bits we just want to touch on. Like importantly, James, kind of like we have discussed like the MTGO Vintage Cube when we were talking about this archetype. Kind of like what power level of cube do you think this archetype can fit in?
Potentially really high power level cubes. Like, obviously, like MTGO Vintage Cube is kind of a go-to high power level cube, and this is in there as a sort of light package, I would say. I think the more dedicated version probably need to go a little bit down the power level to before you're looking at the containment constructs and the Poxwalkers and Squee Goblin Nabobs. But honestly, I don't think you need to go down. Like, it doesn't need to be in a low power level cube for that. I think in like a more mid power level cube but the more dedicated full on archetype can still work very well. Plus, it's I like that it's an interesting thing to do with your aggro decks, and that I think does work very well at high power levels. So I like it a lot. I think it's one place I wouldn't really recommend it is like rarity constrained cubes. Just most of the cards we've talked about are theirs. So if you wanted to do something similar at common, uncommon, it would look pretty different. But yeah, I think it's it can really go in any power level because obviously if you're in a low power level, cut the most explosive cards we've talked about and lean into some of the more lower power level ones, right? Like you cut Inti and you run Containment Construct, right? Like it's fine.
No, definitely. And like this isn't. I know that this is an episode where I've talked about Bazaar of Baghdad, but it is a relatively budget package to include as well. Like none of the cards I don't think are super expensive. I think it'll be stuff like Currency Converter and Fable of the Mirror Breaker are probably some of the more expensive cards, just because they see play in a bunch of other formats and they're generally just very strong. And until they get reprints, they'll be a bit pricey. But like the majority of the cards we're talking about, because they're not really commander cards, as it were, they're kind of good one-on-one cards. It means they're not as expensive. they're kind of weird. It's the perfect cube archetype because we're not really taking a deck from like Legacy or Vintage. This is a kind of a deck that is pulling cards from all across Magic, but it's a one-on-one archetype, so it's not expensive because of commanders. That's an even better reason to include it in cube. It's not super expensive. You can definitely make a more budget version of this deck exist, which is very, very cool, and I do like that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also quite redundant, right? So like there are a couple of like mid-price cards in here, but if you don't want to spend 15 quid or whatever it is on a Fable, then you just run Seasoned Pyromancer instead, right?
I think actually Fable's only about $6. I reckon the token's more expensive than
that was certainly true for quite a long time. Yeah. Yes. I've cast a lot of Fable because I'm certainly never buying one of those Goblin Shaman tokens for 20 quid, though.
I'm looking, I think on Scryfall it is more expensive, which is wild. Yeah. Reprint the token, damn it. But yeah, so that's kind of like the power level it can fit in. I guess the other thing to always talk about when you're discussing archetypes, because cube archetypes and cards, we want them to go in other decks, we want them to overlap. Kind of like, James, what kind of other archetypes does this strategy go well with? Kind of like what do you think, like what does it go well with?
Yeah, I think this is really flexible in terms of what colors you can combine with. The most important criteria is you want to be a deck that cares about combat and attacking with cheap creatures. Because for me, a lot of the best payoffs are better when you're doing that. I think the time it works best is you're an aggressive deck, but you're an aggressive deck that can grind and has a lot of resilience. And I think that can work across like a really wide, like basically any of the color pairs that combine with red and do that potentially. But I'd say the most natural ones are probably red, black.
Yeah.
Black gives you great interaction of a good threats and just coincidentally a bunch of other stuff that cares about being in the graveyard. So, you can run some like blood gas type stuff if you want. Black even has some interesting discard matters payoffs of its own. Something like the Raven Man is not a card I've seen in many cubes, but it looks kind of cool to me. It's like a 2-mana 2/1. You get your end step if you've discarded a card this turn. You get a 1/1 flyer. But yeah, also just Black has a million other ways that it cares about stuff being in the graveyard. So that stuff obviously all works really well with discarding cards. Red green, I think, was also a good home, but the main thing you're getting out of green is like survival of the fittest and I guess Fauna Shaman. But that does have the issue that survival is a tremendously expensive Magic card if you don't want to proxy. The other thing you get from being one of green or black is you can potentially look at Hogak for this deck. Hogak is a really busted Magic card.
Hogak is a proper Magic card, yes. I love that.
It
yes.
Sure is. As anyone who played Modern in that 3 months or whatever it was will attest. Pretty messed up. But the issue with Hogak is you have to have a lot of creatures that are either green or black.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't just be mostly red creatures because you won't be able to convoke it.
You do need a way of getting there, yeah.
Yeah, but I think it can overlap nicely if you're doing some like green-black graveyardy stuff, as many cubes do. That potentially has some nice overlap in this deck.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I like green and black pairing with this because they both have ways of also bringing stuff back from the graveyard. Like this deck, if you can cast it, you'll probably like throw a cheeky reanimate in there. Not going to be bad. Like even in Tomb, like finding something to put in the graveyard, like finding the Phoenix to put in the graveyard so you can bring it back can win you a game of Magic. That's pretty solid. And in green, you obviously get land recursion. So like Crucible of World effects, like that can be pretty good if you're pitching your lands. Again, it's just ways of giving the deck more synergy, more like if you're freely pitching the land you're going to play every turn and getting advantage from that, that's really good. It's just more ways of kind of like just giving you more advantage of your opponent and just like making that engine that little bit better, which ultimately kind of like, is that fair, James? The more all-in version is more like an engine, but the smaller package version is more just like an addition to an aggro deck.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think if you're going much more to this as an archetype, a dedicated archetype rather than just a package, you're probably looking a bit less like an aggressive deck and a bit more grindy and about the engines.
Right, okay, so we're kind of coming to an end of the episode now. Kind of, James, final thoughts on red discard matters.
Yeah, I've been really high on this for a while now. I'm a big proponent of trying to make your aggressive decks do something interesting. I think there's a lot of cubes where it's like there are a bunch of interesting, distinct archetypes, and then there's just sort of some red aggressive cards. And I think it's a lot more fun if your red 2-drop is like Evora or something than if it's I don't know, Kari Zev, say, just like generic red creature that attacks. I think this is a really good way to do that. And then if you want to commit to it more as an archetype, I think that can be really rewarding too.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that. Like I know a lot of the it's another thing to do in red that isn't the generic just turn lad sideways, and it's not like the super high busted like broadside bombardiers or gut. It's kind of like it still can be very, very strong, and we've given ways of really powering it up. Like if you really want this to go ham, then yeah, proxy up that Bazaar of Baghdad kids and go ham with it. But like again, the power level can be tuned to the vast majority of cubes, and that is the sign of a really good archetype, that it can go in a vast majority of cubes and be fun and be enjoyable and be strong in all of them. Yeah, I'm always here for archetypes like that, and it is also an archetype that will get more cards. Like any card that does something with discard is conceivable in this deck. Kind of like I think we both completely missed Evora, not because we didn't do a set review on it, but because it was in a Jumpstart product, and that's not our fault that we missed it. But
yeah,
like,
I'm not reading Jumpstart cards when they come out. Sorry.
No. I look through them, but this is like Evora is an uncommon. Like I think like it's not our fault. We're doing our best.
Honestly, I didn't just miss that Evora was in the Jumpstart set. I missed that there was a Jumpstart set.
That's more it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're trying, damn it, we're trying. Awesome. But yeah, I think that's where we're going to leave it for today. James, pleasure. That was a really nice little chat. And yeah, I really love this archetype. And yeah, I think it's one that is just going to see more and more play in the coming years.
Nice. Yeah, always a pleasure.
Wonderful. All right, that's going to do it for today. Do give us a 5-star rating, give us a positive review, tell a friend, whatever your podcast platform allows you to give positive affirmation for, please do it. Greatly appreciated. Helps us grow the podcast, helps us do more cool and interesting things. Until next time, it's goodbye from me, it's goodbye from James, and we'll see you all soon. Much love. Goodbye.